my kitchen. My name is Rabbi Finn and you are here for another Bereishit bites from Bournemouth and Elstree United Synagogue. Every week I am baking or making something related to that week's Torah portion, and this week I've got an amazing recipe for you. But first, let's recap this week's portion. This week's portion is called Vayeshev, and it tells the story made famous first by God by writing it in the Torah, but then by Andrew Lloyd Webber in Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. It basically tells the real version of that story. We start off with Joseph having these two dreams, these amazing dreams. He tells his brothers. The brothers, we're told, become really quite jealous of Joseph, so much so that they plot to kill him. Instead of killing him, though, they end up throwing him in a pit and then selling him into slavery. Joseph finds his way into Egypt, and there's a whole incident with Potiphar's wife, and he finds himself further down into jail in Egypt. And there he meets two characters, the baker and the butler. And the baker and the butler both have their own dreams, and Joseph interprets them. And do you know what? Just as Joseph interprets, so too comes to pass. Let me share with you a very short idea about this week's Torah portion, because the question should always be asked: how is it possible that the children of Jacob, the children of Yaakov, pious, religious people, could plot to kill one of their brothers? How is it that we ended up in a situation where the brothers hate Joseph so much that they want to kill him, that they come to a logical conclusion that they must get rid of him? If you look inside the Torah, we're told something amazing. That when Joseph is coming towards them, we're told that the brothers, by Yiru or Tomerachok, they saw him from a distance. Now, one way to translate that is literally literal. They saw him in the distance. But another way, which a number of rabbis pick up on, is by Yiru or Tomerachok describes their relationship with him. They saw him at a distance. There was no dialogue. There was no communication between the two parties. There was no mediation. There was no point at which the brothers were able to express the pain that they felt, believing that Joseph was becoming their father's favourite, and also that Joseph was having these dreams which frankly scared the brothers. But they didn't engage with Joseph. Instead, they left him in the distance, and they started to ascribe to him motives. They started to make presumptions about him and about his behaviour, and this led to, in their minds, a logical conclusion that it was the right thing to kill him. This is what happens when we do not engage with dialogue with those people who we disagree with. We start to create these fictions in our mind, which can lead us to a very dangerous place. The message of this week's portion is the importance of not vayiru or tomerachok, not viewing people from a distance, but actually trying to bridge that gap, bridge that divide. Where there is disagreement, speak it through, acknowledge it, have dialogue. Don't ever cut the other person off, because that's going to end up with more deleterious consequences than the opposite. For this week's portion, I've got a brilliant recipe for you. We are making donuts! Now, it's not because it's Chanukah, that's just a happy coincidence. These donuts are the perfect food for this week's portion because they take together two food elements in our portion. As I mentioned, Joseph meets two people. He meets the butler and the baker, but in truth, the butler is a mistranslation. We're told he meets the Sahar of Fim, which is the chief baker, and the Sar Hamashkim, the chief liquid person, or the chief bartender, or the chief sommelier. So I thought, how can we bridge these two professions together? And I thought, well, if you go to any bakery in the next week, you're going to want to buy a donut. But how to bring in the bartender element, the alcoholic element? Well, clearly, make your donuts, fill them with some whiskey cream. So here we are. We are going to be making donuts filled with whiskey cream and topped with a beautiful dark chocolate ganache. I hope you give these a try. They are a little bit fiddly, only because there's a number of processes, but please give them a try. Enjoy. Shabbat Shalom. We are making donuts. Now, I know donuts sound scary and you're thinking, why don't I just go to a bakery, give them some money and let them give me a beautiful donut instead? Well, trust me, nothing beats a homemade donut. That sense of satisfaction as you bite into it and enjoy the fruit of your labour. Now, in truth, donuts are not that difficult to make, but there are 5 different elements. Element number 1 is making the dough. Element number 2 is shaping the dough. Element number 3 is frying the dough. Element number 4 is making a filling if you're not using jam. And element number 5 is filling up the donut. So let's start off with element number one. We're going to make the dough, and the dough is a basic donut dough. If you search the internet, you're going to find various variations of this. I'm making my donuts purer, that is dairy free, so that I'm able to enjoy them after a meaty meal. So you're going to need a large bowl. Into that bowl, you want to pour 75 grams of warm water. It's really important to measure your water by weight, not by the measurements of these jugs, because they're often not that accurate. So 75 grams of warm water. Once I've added my warm water, I'm going to add in 5 grams of easy action or very quick ready yeast. 5 grams of that, followed by 40 grams of caster sugar. Into my bowl, I'm now going to add 250 grams of bread flour. Really important to use bread flour, not plain flour, not self-raising. Bread flour has more protein in, therefore it's going to turn out better donuts. Just pour it in. This is a really simple recipe. 5 grams of salt. Give this a little bit of a mix in the bowl like that, and then 2 eggs. So, to recap, 75 grams of water, 5 grams of yeast, 40 grams of sugar, 5 grams of salt, 250 grams of bread flour, and 2 eggs. So what you need to do is get your hand in and just give it all a really good mix so that it starts to come together into a dough. At this point, you're going to find out whether or not you're going to need to add a little bit more flour or a little bit more water to your dough. It's going to be quite a wet dough. And actually, if I'm honest, I prefer to use a machine, an electric mixer, to do the kneading for me. But I will just show you, it is quite a wet dough, so that is why it's often better to use a machine. So once you've got it together, get it off your fingers and leave it there for a couple of minutes. Let the water soak into the flour, let the flour become fully hydrated whilst you clean your hands. So now you've got a choice. You can either spend the next 8 minutes kneading by hand on a really well-floured surface, but it's a quite sticky dough. So my recommendation actually is to use a stand mix with a dough hook and do it on the lowest speed for 5 minutes. Trust me, it will make life much, much easier and your hands aren't going to get completely sticky. So I'm going to do this for 5 minutes and I'm going to show you the final stage of making our dough for the donuts. Once it has finished kneading, cover it with some cling film and leave for a couple of hours till it's doubled in size, or better still, leave it overnight in the fridge and trust me, it's going to be even better. I will see you once this is ready to start shaping into donuts. Once your dough has been kneading in the machine for about 5 minutes, give it a couple of minutes to rest. Then add in 60 grams of margarine cut up into small cubes. Make sure the margarine has been sitting out of the fridge for a couple of hours so that it is soft enough. You want to do it a few cubes at a time until it is all incorporated, and then give it another couple of minutes in the machine to knead. As I said before, it is quite a wet dough, do not worry. Once it has finished kneading, cover it with some cling film and leave for a couple of hours till it's doubled in size. Once you have left your dough to rise for a couple of hours, you want to place it in the fridge for at least 2 hours, ideally overnight, so that the dough will harden up slightly and become easier to work with as you try and shape your donuts. So, my dough has been resting in the fridge overnight and is now ready to shape into donuts. This is really quite easy. First, flour your hands. Second, grab a small amount of dough, roughly 40 to 50 grams worth of dough. I like to measure it so that all of my donuts are going to be the same size. And once you've got enough dough in your ball, just give it a really, really good roll in your hand so you get it into quite a tight ball. And once it's quite tight, just flatten it ever so slightly and put it on your sheet of paper. It's going to look small. Don't worry, because it's going to first rise and then it's going to puff up when you put it in the oil. So repeat that for all of your dough and leave it to rest covered for a good couple of hours until it has doubled in size. Whilst the donuts are rising and proving, now is a perfect time to make our filling. We're going to be making a whiskey cream filling. It sounds amazing, followed by a chocolate ganache. Let's start off with a whiskey cream filling. It's really, really quite easy. You need a pan. Put your pan on the heat and add to it 3/4 of a cup of milk. Ideally whole milk, but if you can't, then just use semi-skimmed milk. and bring that up to getting warm, close to boiling temperature. Whilst that is warming up, what you want to do is as follows. Get a bowl. Into your bowl, add 2 egg yolks. Add 1/4 cup of white sugar. A teaspoon of vanilla. 2 tablespoons of corn flour. And then finally, a tablespoon of whiskey. If you wanted to have a bit more of a kick, you can even add a little bit more. But I want it to have a subtle whiskey taste. Actually, a generous tablespoon of whiskey. Once you've got all of your ingredients in, give it a quick mix. And it's going to form into a bit of a thick paste. And now you are ready to add the milk. So the milk has gotten warm. I've mixed up my egg yolks, corn flour, whiskey. Definitely getting some whiskey in there. A bit of sugar and my vanilla. And I'm going to slowly add my warmed milk to the bowl. Very, very slowly. You do not want to curdle the eggs. Whisking the whole time. Once you've done that, put it back in the pan and pour your mix back in to the pan. And bring it up to the boil, whisking the entire time. And as it comes to a boil, you're going to notice that it will start to thicken up. After about 3-4 minutes, it will start to thicken up and turn quite gloopy. That is a point that you know it is done. So it's taken about a minute, quite high heat, but it's become really quite thick. You can see it is glooping off the thing. Constantly whisk, otherwise it will catch at the bottom. Give it a smell. If you want a bit more whiskey, now is the time to add a tiny bit more whiskey. But I'm quite happy with this. And what you want to do is pour it into a bowl and cover it with some cling film to enable it to set. As I said, it should be quite thick. Let me show you. Just giving it a final whisk. Let me show you how thick it is. It's like a custard. It's like quite a thick custard. And this is going to get thicker as it rests now and cools down. Obviously, this is too hot to put into the donut, which is why you make it in advance. And get ready to fry your donuts. So my dough has been proving for 3 hours and it's doubled in size. What I've then done is taken a really sharp knife and scored the paper so I can create these little squares here so that it's easier to transfer the dough into the fryer. Set my fryer at 180 degrees Celsius. And what you want to do is fry it for 2 minutes on each side and then it's going to be perfectly done. If you are going to then make jam donuts, you want to take that fried donut and dump it straight into a bowl of sugar. But as we're going to be covering with a chocolate ganache and filling it with our whiskey cream, I'm not going to do that. So 2 minutes either side, and I'll show you once they have all been fried. Here we have it. Here are my donuts. They've been fried. I've let them cool down. They look amazing. They smell absolutely brilliant. I'm going to show you how to assemble it. First things first, you want to make some ganache. I've made my simple ganache by melting 100 millilitres of double cream with about 30 grams of dark chocolate. Give it a really good mix and it's going to be this beautiful, dark, pourable consistency, which when it's set is going to be absolutely amazing. Get a piping bag or a syringe and fill it with some of your whiskey cream. And then really simple, grab a donut, find the white area in between the two golden sides, because that is the weakest point. Shove the syringe in and just put in as much filling as you like. I like it so that it starts to overflow. That's the perfect amount of filling for me. Once you've got the filling, take your donut and gently dip it into the chocolate ganache. Make sure the whole side is covered. Gently lift out. Grab a plate and put it on. You can see here's what I made earlier. And there you have it. whiskey cream filled donut with a chocolate ganache. Absolutely amazing for Chanukah, but also magically related to this week's tile portion. I hope you give these a try. They are amazing. If you want more whiskey, throw more whiskey. If you want to do Baileys in there, do Baileys in there. But whatever you do, try making donuts yourself. It's not as hard as you might think it is. And trust me, it is so much more satisfying than going to the shop and buying them. Enjoy.